Our next guest is Giulio Chinappi from Italy. Giulio, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm Giulio Chinappi from Italy. I represent CESM, and I'm going to, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and I'm going to introduce my intervention. So, in my opinion, what we are witnessing is not simply another regional escalation. It is a brutal act of aggression by US imperialism and the Zionist regime against the Islamic Republic of Iran, in clear violation of international law and of the most basic principles of state sovereignty. The United Nations Charter is explicit. All members shall refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. At the same time, the IAEA has reiterated that armed attacks on nuclear facilities should never take place. Yet, Iran has been attacked militarily, and nuclear-related sites, such as Natanz, have again come under fire. This is not the defense of international law. It is the destruction of international law by those who claim to be its guardians. But this aggression is not only an attack on Iran, it is also an attack on multipolarity itself. Iran is being punished not because it represents an imminent threat toward peace, but because it has refused subordination to the US-led imperial order. It has insisted on its sovereignty, on its independent regional role, on its strategic partnerships outside Washington's control, and on its right to pursue an autonomous path of development. In this sense, the attack on Iran is a warning to all countries that refuse obedience. If you do not submit, you will be sanctioned, isolated, destabilized, or bombed. This is why the Iranian question cannot be separated from the broader crisis of the international order. The real target is not just Iran. The real target is the possibility that a sovereign state can resist the empire and contribute to a multipolar world. When the United States and Israel attack Iran, they are not simply striking one country. They are sending a message against every process of geopolitical rebalancing, every attempt by the global south and Eurasian powers to weaken unipolar domination. For this reason, the position taken by Italy and by the European Union deserves the harshest criticism. Brussels has formally invoked restraint and international law, but in practice, its collective statement has framed Iran itself as the main problem, while presenting the conflict above all through the prism of Iranian destabilizing activities, sanctions, and the objective of preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. The EU text is a compromise reflecting divisions inside the bloc, and European diplomats admitted Europe has little influence and is essentially a bystander. This is the political bankruptcy of the European Union. It speaks the language of law while accepting the hierarchy of force imposed by Washington. The Italian government has been no better. Rome has not acted as an autonomous diplomatic subject. It has acted as a subordinate Atlantic outpost, concerned above all with managing the consequences of war rather than opposing its criminal origins. Foreign Minister Tajani admitted that the United States and Israel decided independently and confidentially when to intervene, and that there had been no request to involve American bases in Italy. Even this says a great deal. Italy is not a sovereign actor shaping events, but a secondary ally expected to adapt after the fact to decisions taken elsewhere. There is, however, an important exception inside Europe, and that is Spain. Pedro Sanchez rejected the US-Israeli action, calling it a contribution to a more uncertain and hostile international order. Spain also refused to allow its bases at Rota and Moron to be used for operations linked to the strikes on Iran. Trump's furious reaction, including threats of economic retaliation, only confirmed how rare and politically significant even a limited act of European dissent has become. Spain has shown that saying no to Washington is still possible. The deeper tragedy is that Europe's political servility is now producing material consequences. Italy and the EU have committed a form of strategic suicide by dismantling the energy relationship with Russia in order to satisfy US geopolitical priorities. Official EU data show that Russian gas fell from around 40 to 45% of imports in 2021 to roughly 12 to 13% in 2025, while US LNG has surged. Reuters reported that in January 2026, the United States supplied 60% of all EU LNG imports, and when EU's own energy commissioner warned against replacing one dependency with another. This is not energy sovereignty, it is dependency reorganized under American leadership. And now the consequences are becoming even more evident. The war against Iran is shaking energy markets, threatening maritime routes, and increasing fears over the Strait of Hormuz. EU officials themselves have acknowledged the economic dangers of escalations, including disruptions to oil deliveries and supply chains, while energy prices are rising and markets are rattled by the widening conflict. Europe has made itself weaker twice over, first by severing a relatively stable energy relationship with Russia, and then by tying its future to US LNG and to the strategic chaos generated by American wars. So today Europe is paying the price of its own subordination. It has lost cheap energy, lost strategic autonomy, lost diplomatic credibility, and now risks being dragged ever deeper into a chain of wars that it neither controls nor benefits from. This is why I call it strategic suicide. A continent that could have been a pole in a multipolar order has instead chosen to function as a civilian and military appendage of the United States. In conclusion, the aggression against Iran must be condemned without ambiguity. It is illegal, destabilizing, and profoundly dangerous. It is an aggression against a sovereign state, an aggression against international law, and an aggression against the emerging multipolar order. The role of Italy and of most of the European Union has been shameful. Not the role of peacemakers, but of compliant followers. And the energy crisis now hitting Europe is not an accident. It is the direct result of political choices made in obedience to Washington against Europe's own interests. If Europe wants a future, it must break with this logic. It must reject imperial war, recover strategic autonomy, rebuild an independent energy policy, and accept the reality that the world is no longer unipolar. Otherwise, it will continue to decline economically, politically, and morally, while others shape the new international order. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you very much. When you talked about this suicide pact that the EU joined against its own interests, especially in terms of energy, is very well said, because that is essentially what happened. They agreed to serve U.S. interests, or I should say, as Alexander Gilevich put it, the interests of Epstein Island or the Epstein regime. I forget which particular terminology he used, but that's essentially it. And as we go into a multipolar world, we have to get away from blocs, vassal states, so on and so forth, because as soon as you're a vassal, you and all the people in your country are never going to get your interests properly served.